Hi, I'm coming to you today with another book review, sort of. I'm currently reading The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I'm making progress with it, but it's going to be a little while yet until I finish it, and then I'm ready to make a video. And I fancy talking. I didn't really want to talk to anyone in particular, though. And if you talk to yourself without a camera in front of you, then that's really weird. And you have to start asking yourself some serious questions that I don't really want to know the answer to. So I've stuck a camera in front of me, and I thought I'd just talk about a book that I read a while ago. And I say a while ago because it took me a long time to read a book. So the book is, as you can see on the title of the video, it's Ayn Rand's The Fountainhead. And this is going to be a bit more vague. I mean, the last two videos were pretty vague and didn't cite too many specific details from the book. This one even more so, because I finished this book I think it was this summer, so it was a few months ago now, and it took me a really long time to read a book. I was not really reading as a hobby. When I read this book, I wanted to read the book, and it was hard for me to get through it. I just wasn't reading consistently as a hobby. I would go through sort of months breaks between reading sometimes. So I didn't experience it properly. I think I probably did the book a disservice there by not reading it continuously enough for everything to be fresh in my memory between each read. There were definitely some times when I'd kind of forgotten what had happened of what I'd already read in the book once I went back to it, and I only was able to sort of piece together my memory of what did happen when I read further on the book, and then I sparked my memories of details. So this isn't exactly a review. None of these videos are exactly reviews, but this is even more so, a lot more casual. I just wanted to talk about the book. The fact that I'm forced to be a little bit more casual about it probably isn't the worst thing, because this is a very controversial book. I don't know if there's too many more polarizing figures than Ayn Rand. Everyone seems to have, if you talk about love-hate, that really seems to apply for Ayn Rand. A lot of people hate her, and a lot of people love her and idolize her. You have like the Ayn Rand Institute, people live by her philosophy. So there's the two ends of the spectrum. I think more people, well, I mean, people who I socialize with don't really know who Ayn Rand is, to be honest. But the few people that I do know who Ayn Rand is, that I do socialize with, and the people that generally fit into my demographic, are much more prone to dislike Ayn Rand, for sure. Which I think is unfortunate. I read the book because I was aware of Ayn Rand, I was aware of her philosophy, I was aware of her beliefs. I enjoy philosophy, political philosophy and stuff like that, so I was aware of her beliefs, and I felt like she had something interesting to say. So I read the book. I was advised by an Ayn Rand fan that The Fountainhead should be read before Atlas Shrugged, so I didn't go for Atlas Shrugged, the more famous book. I went for The Fountainhead. That's a big old book with small writing, and yeah, it took me a long time to get through it. And it's a book about an architect. There's a love story too, which is also a huge part of it, but it's pretty much a book about architecture. Well, not about architecture. You're not going to be an architect, but in any sense after reading the book. But about an architect, which isn't the most. I'm not sure what the word to use. It's just not the most immediately captivating of subjects to the average person who hasn't got any previous interest in architecture, for all it can be appreciated. But I had the motivator of that. I valued this book would probably teach me some things or pose some questions to me to keep me going through it, and I'd at least be, even if I didn't like it, I would at least be a more well-rounded and sort of informed person culturally, just for reading it. So I had that to motivate me through it, and I'm glad that I did. I'm glad I read the book. The time it took me to read it, definitely, it kind of reveals, part of that is due to my own habits at the time and my own interest in reading at the time, for sure, but it does reveal that it wasn't necessarily a huge page turner for me throughout the book. Towards the end it was. I actually read the end very quickly. It took me so long to read the first half. The second half was probably only a couple of months. I read the last few chapters, I read very quickly. I really enjoyed those. And I did enjoy the book throughout. It was just slow to sort of to keep yourself motivated and reading it and really sort of engross yourself in it. My thoughts on it is definitely. I mean, it's definitely a book I'd recommend anyone to read. I'd give them a warnings that I've sort of given in this video, but for sure I came away from it, especially in sort of like the way it came together in those last few chapters and Howard's closing speech in court. I came away from it thinking that it did pose some questions, and I thought the interesting part of it. So obviously Howard Rourke is the hero of the book, if you will. And because I was aware of Ayn Rand's philosophy and her thoughts prior to reading the book, I was quickly able to identify on being introduced to Howard and Peter Keating, which was the good guy and which was the bad guy, to put it in really simple terms. Which I think was probably pretty clear relatively early on to anyone anyway, but right away I knew. I think Howard as a lead character and hero, I sort of would compare him to like Superman for me, in that I don't like the Superman. I don't like superhero movies actually, but I specifically don't like Superman because he's not very he's not humanized much. He's pretty flawless. He's not really led by emotions. You don't really see his emotions involved all that much. I'm also ignorant. I don't really watch any superhero or Superman stuff. This is my idea of Superman, but that's my idea of him anyway. Sorry if it's wrong, but it's still relevant as an analogy. And Howard kind of had that same thing for me. You know, there were moments where we got told of Howard's emotions, and those were moments I found him interesting and endearing. You know, it was generally just around his love for Dominique, and then towards the end his affection for Gail as well. Those were moments when I did warm to Howard. And although you certainly like respect his character and the resolve he has throughout the book, and I was still rooting for him. The book didn't fail to make me root for him at all, and I believed that he was right and acting right. You know, I didn't not believe and buy into that part. Just when I'm not, for the long periods of the book where I wasn't really getting any emotion from him, and he didn't seem to be guided by any emotion. I'm a very emotional person, so I need to see that to relate to it sometimes. During those periods of the book, it was he just wasn't the most interesting character to be reading about at that time. Neither was Peter Keating. I enjoyed the Howard Rourke parts more than the Peter Keating parts, even in that first half of the book, it should be said. Peter Keating, yeah, I think we all know someone like Peter Keating. I think we're all like Peter Keating to varying degrees. You just hope not too much. Definitely in today's society, more than ever, probably we have a lot of it in us. And I'm sorry to say in a way that there's often times where I probably felt maybe my emotions and my values were more like Howard's, but my actual actions and how I act could probably be more compared to Peter. So just there, the book sort of definitely offers some questions and some food for thought to reevaluate how you go about living your life. But yeah, Peter. But what I did say, I found I was never really rooting against Peter. There's certain moments when he do something really awful, or something really pathetic where you're rooting against him, but he was a pitiful character, you know, not a character you hated. Ellsworth was a character you hated, and I wanted to see Ellsworth get demolished, you know, and humiliated, bad things. He was a really contemptible character. Ellsworth, oddly as well, like I imagine him to be like, I can't remember how he was described physically in the book. I'm sure he was, and this probably did influence my picture of him. But I imagine him to be a very stout fella. And weirdly, I've gone on a tangent here of Peter Keating, but I just had this thought about Ellsworth. As the book came on, and there was times towards the end of the book where Ellsworth actually displayed a lot of sort of power in a way, and sort of had some success. But again, and I said this in my review of the Sun Also Rises, in regards to Robert Cohn, name went for a moment there, and that even in Robert Cohen's moments of triumph, you just didn't feel impressed by him. You still kind of felt he was lame. And with Ellsworth, it was a different thing. It wasn't like a lame thing, but I just didn't like him more, obviously. I guess that makes sense. But he did become more of a sallow, my image of him became even more sallow, even more sort of just like this ball of a man. So his successes didn't actually increase the esteem I held him in, and his sort of power plays, which ultimately to backfire. But yeah, so I found that sort of an interesting thing. But Peter, yeah, like I was never really rooting against Peter consistently. I was sort of more rooting for him to have an awakening. And I guess a reason why he never really does have an awakening, for all he seems to, I think he has a little bit of an awakening, but he never really understands it. And I think that's intentional from Ayn Rand. I think Ayn probably believed, and it's pretty clear in the book that Ayn believes that. I can't remember the term she used. There was a term she used, and I forgot it. I should have reread some of the book before doing this, probably. But the concept was that they are most people that are sort of people that sort of passers by, if you will. They go along with everything, and they accept everything, and they sort of mold to the people around them, and to get where they are told they need to be. They'll sort of mold into that form. They're not truly happy. They will do things that will be told to them by others are good and valuable, but they don't feel it in their soul. Those sort of people, and there are others that are not that way, and they kind of see through the bullshit, if you will. I hope that doesn't get some sort of weird YouTube flag. I don't know how YouTube works. Anyway, so yeah, Peter. I was kind of rooting for him to be. I think there's a reason why he didn't, and yeah, towards the end he seemed to kind of get it for all he was still himself. The most interesting character for me, and the reason why towards the end of the book I turned the pages much more quicker, was Gale Wynyard. I found him to be the character I really liked, and any movie I watch, I'm a sucker for like an anti-hero, and he wasn't, and he was that, because he was the head of this awful paper that attacked Howard, but he knew what was going on, he got it, and then he ends up defending Howard unconditionally, really, at any expense. And he's just like someone who gets it, like Howard, but it's just a little bit more jagged edges, a little more rough around the edges, a little bit more character to him. When he was reflecting on sort of the moments that formed him into the person who was resolute for such huge success with Howard, he reflected on the feelings of anger and pain. So right from the introduction to him, in terms of actually really meeting him and him not being a peripheral character, I understood his motivations, and he was human to me. And he also had like tough moments where he neared on suicide. So yeah, for sure, Gale Wynyard made the book so much better for me when he was introduced, and that's the sort of character that I enjoy. And he was the one I was really rooting for, I think, for the most part. I suppose Dominique could also, sort of fit that mold. She was also a little bit rough around the edges, but got it. But there was some things, I don't know. I found a lot of Dominique's actions a little bit confusing. I didn't really get it. I don't get this concept of like she couldn't stand being with Howard because she didn't think it was all going to go well for him, and the pain the world was inflicting on him. So she had to be with his enemies and the people that were the opposite of him, because she loved him so much. I gotta be honest, I don't really understand that. That doesn't really work for me. What if things hadn't gone well for Howard and he hadn't, like, you would have just never been with him? Like, that seems kind of stupid, and not really how you treat someone you love. So I don't really buy into Dominique's role. It was all a bit dramatic around here as well. Maybe this is this sounds sexist, but maybe it's like a female, male reading this book. Maybe I don't understand how Dominique sort of deals with this stuff compared to Gale, because granted some of Gale's stuff's irrational, but there's sort of ego behind it, and I kind of get it. Maybe another person, a female or just somebody who's wired a little bit differently, would understand Dominique's actions, but I kind of found her annoying, to be honest, because it was also melodramatic, when she thinks she might be dying, or she was kind of dying, but she was just happy to sort of stay in it, whatever. I'm a little bit more pragmatic than Dominique. Dominique was a bit too much more on the emotional side for me, where it was chaotic emotions without any sort of reason or logic or rationale, to me, which is weird because Ayn Rand's all about logic and rationale. But she also has some views that people would consider as sexist for sure too. So maybe that was her trying to portray how women are. I don't know. But yeah, I didn't really love Dominique. I hope I didn't say anything else too offensive to anyone. But that was kind of just my interpretation of it. So that's sort of all the characters I've just sort of been through there. I enjoyed the way the book played out. It definitely, yeah, I liked the court scene. The court scene was like to end in sort of well, towards the end, the court scene where the hero is sort of just giving his speech to the audience. It seems a little bit hacky, maybe, but yeah, maybe there was another way I could have been done, but maybe it wasn't hacky at the time of writing. So that, I guess, also needs to be considered. And it functioned because that, you know, that sort of Howard wrote court speech did involve a lot of interesting content, and it kind of works well now because I don't want to read the whole book again, but I wouldn't mind reading that section of it again, and now I can go back and just read that section and refresh that. So it works well in that part. But yeah, I think it's a great book to read, and I wish it was an easier read, because if it was an easier read, I would really advise those that don't like Ayn Rand to read it, just to sort of fully, because I thought I understood her ideas, but I didn't really until reading this. I probably could, you know, learn those ideas even more if I read more of her work. But yeah, maybe it would be interesting to get someone who doesn't like Ayn Rand's views, thoughts on the book, and I have seen some people give that. But yeah, it would be interesting. I'd love to sit down and talk to someone to see how they sort of perceived things, who they related to in the book, which parts of the book did they think were sort of unrealistic or false in terms of the values they were portraying. I certainly think Howard, again, say Superman, he was a bit of an unrealistic character. You know, nobody is 100% disciplined. I don't think so anyway. Maybe there is, but I'm not sure I buy that. I don't think anyone's 100% disciplined, and it kind of creates a false standard in a way. I mean, it's a book, it's an art. It doesn't have to be completely realistic, and it doesn't have to, people shouldn't be holding themselves to art, although we do have a tendency to do so sometimes. But yeah, you just don't, they do describe, Ayn does describe the moments in Howard's life where he's sat in a cold, grey office with nothing but his work, and he doesn't own anything, and the sort of the darkness of those days. But that still doesn't give you the reality of the seconds and minutes that pass by. That, again, in today's society, when we're all so connected and overly stimulated, that just would be magnified by 1,000 times compared to what it was then, and seems so much more not doable now, because this is what we're used to, something so different now. So I think that maybe makes Howard even a little bit less of a realistic character. But nevertheless, he was still, I liked how he sort of, we learned more about him, and he got opened up to us towards the end, and then I did enjoy him. It was only the sort of first 2/3 of the book when I didn't dislike him at all, but it wasn't enough for me. It wasn't really doing it for me, I guess. But it's a very good book. It's a very complete story, I'd say. And it poses you questions. It's a long book, but I don't think it's needlessly long. I think every detail does seem like it means something and it matters. And from that perspective, it probably would be an interesting book to reread, although I'm not going to do it. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I enjoy Ayn Rand generally. I would not call myself a Randian. I would not subscribe to an Ayn Rand Institute or anything, but just as a figure in our culture, I think she does add one sort of dimension and perspective that is interesting and needs to be listened to and weighed up, not followed religiously, but should be listened to for sure. So yeah, that was my thoughts on the book. If anyone wants to hit me up, happens to see this, and has any thoughts on the book, please do so. And if you enjoyed this, subscribe, because I will be slowly releasing more and more videos about me talking about books. So thank you for listening, and I'll post another one soon.